Hey there, welcome to Board Game Hot Takes. My name's Tim.
And this is Chris.
This is Adam.
And tonight we're going to be giving our hot take review on the game we just finished playing, Thunder Road Vendetta. We'll also be talking about some games that have been on our table recently, including Glory to Rome, Concordia, and Newton. But before that, we have a question that I asked on social media. I often ask poll questions, but this week I just went with a straight out question because I just wanted people to comment and give us some answers here. The question I asked was, which game led to the most frustrating or painful experience you've had punching or sorting a new board game? How'd you guys answer this?
I'm going to go with Barrage. It was pretty frustrating. I think I know what Chris is going to say, so I'm going to let him talk about that. At least I have a guess what Chris is going to say. We'll see what he says. But Barrage, for me, there's a surprising amount of pieces in this one, and there wasn't the greatest way to store it. I think part of my frustration was I tried to use a folded space that I had for Scythe or something, some extra things, and then I tried to put some pieces in there that they didn't quite fit right. So it's more my own doing than Barrage itself. But you have to do a little bit of building with Barrage too. You got to punch all these things out, build the little wheels, which don't even work that well. And then there's all these little contracts and all these little other things. I have the expansion too. So it's a beast to store all that stuff. And the box isn't all that big, which I appreciate. So Barrage, great game. Haven't found the organization solution that I want just yet.
You tried to house rule your insert. Is that what happened there?
I tried to house rule my insert. Didn't work out. That's right, Tim. Good way to put it.
It's always the house rules with Adam. Now, for me, this was a super easy one. It did not even take a second of thought to answer this one. And there was only one possible game that it could be, and that was Voidfall.
Yeah.
Everything that can go wrong with having to punch a game goes wrong with Voidfall. It takes forever. I think I even joked in one of our episodes that it took me nearly a weekend to get that game just punched. You have to punch things. You have to put things together. You have to try to gather different pieces from different punch boards and organize them into these little boxes. I mean, there's like a 10-page guide on how to pack your box with this thing. It was absolutely crazy. Now, I can't even say that it's this amazing game that was worth all the punchings. I don't even remember. And it's been so long since we played this game. I'm actually looking forward to getting it played again next time we do our next con. And then I can maybe make a judgment about whether it's worth all of that trouble.
Well, I think it was worth it, but you're absolutely right. This was a complete mess. I mean, having to okay, I don't mind. I actually enjoy punching and kind of organizing new games. I think it's a really fun experience most of the time, but you know what I don't like is assembling my games. And with Voidfall, you had to actually put these little wheels together. It was such a pain in the butt. And then separating out the different technologies for each faction was also a complete hassle, getting these little inserts and finding the right cards to put in each thing. Oh, man.
Speaking of those wheels, Tim, there's like dark gray and light gray.
Yes, I know.
You don't like put them in the right spots. Like I accidentally did it, I think, wrong. And I was like, oh, I can't undo these things. And I maybe undid one and wedged it underneath my fingernail. And I'm like, oh, what a pain. Like literally painful experience.
You know how you're like in the middle of a game and you need a rules call and people spend like a half an hour poring over the instructions to try to understand what the rule is? It was like that punching this game. I'm like, there's this one thing that's supposed to go with this other thing in this box for the faction, and I couldn't figure out what it was. So I'm like looking at the manual, trying to like interpret things, and it's like,
You have to go to the forums to find out how to punch it correctly.
Oh man, that hurt.
That's funny.
All right.
It's so funny. I actually completely wasn't even thinking about Voidfall when I asked this question until you just mentioned it. And then I think I just had PTSD and just kind of blocked it from my memory.
Yeah.
But I've had a couple. So like I said, I generally enjoy this experience. So I wouldn't usually say it's painful. And the only reason I asked this question is because one of my local friends said, hey, Tim, you should throw this question out. And I was like, that's a great question. But I've had a couple that were pretty rough, like Frosthaven has a pretty good instruction thing, but it's so much stuff to punch and organize. You have like 500 little kind of character standees for all the different monsters, and you're supposed to kind of group them together based on monster type. And there's like thousands of cards in that box that you have to sort in different ways. So that one was a lot. The Everdell Complete Collection wouldn't have been bad, I think, except there's supposed to be like a sheet in the box that gives you the instructions on how to set up the insert, and it was missing in mine. So I spent hours trying to figure out how to put all the stuff in this thing. I finally used I flipped up the back of the box, and luckily on the back, it kind of shows at least how to lay out the insert. So that helped a little bit. But I think that was just because mine was missing that piece to it.
What about Anachrony, Tim? Did that cross your mind? It wasn't frustrating because we kind of did it together and we were hanging out and we got to teamwork it a little bit. But
yeah,
even between the two of us, there was so much stuff and it took such a long time to put everything in its little box. So it has a very nice storage solution, but man, it took a while.
Yeah, I remember that one just being kind of tricky because it was like all the deluxe components and it didn't really show you what. So we were punching stuff and I was like, okay, this goes here, but wait a second, there's a plastic piece that goes there. So it was still a little confusing. I think if I'd done that on my own, that would have been quite a chore. So it was a fun experience. I don't have any bad memories about that one.
Right.
The one last one I wanted to mention was Glenmore 2 Chronicles, which is, I think, that's kind of a rule for when you're getting a box with a bunch of expansions in it. And so you're trying to like punch all this stuff and sort it all at the same time. And it's like hard enough to deal with a base game. But then when you've got all this expansion stuff and you got to sort it, Chronicles is literally like supposed to be a whole bunch of modules that you kind of bring in at different pieces. And they each have their own little tuck box. But the punch boards had all this stuff together. So you're punching all this stuff. And then you need to go search through this rule book and be like, okay, what are the components that go in the module 1 box? And then, find it all. And then all the meeples, all the player color meeples had stickers, kilt stickers for each of the little meeples of the specific colors. Yeah. And the meeples are different shapes per faction. So each of the different shapes had a unique shape and color sticker on them. So I hate stickering stuff. Almost as much as I hate assembling the dials in Voidfall. So that one was a beast. Had a couple fun plays of that and then moved it on. So that one was definitely not worth it for me. Yeah. Couple tough ones there. Here's a couple things that some of our listeners said over on our Facebook account. Kiko Archeo said, when the Terraforming Mars Big Box Kickstarter fulfilled, there were metal cube upgrades.
Oh yeah.
Where each of the 400 individual cubes, I had bought 2 sets of the 200 cubes, was stored in its own mini plastic bag.
Right?
Yeah.
What in the world is that all about? I remember
what
that.
What a disaster.
Who thought that was a good idea?
I totally remember that too. In fact, my friend's kids were over that day and her 10-year-old son was there. And I opened the box up and I saw how this was. And I was like, hey, why don't you come help me with this? And I made this 10-year-old kid unpackage all these little gold cubes. That was hilarious. And then over on Blue Sky, I just wanted to mention one comment here. Lucas Sorensen said, I haven't even played yet, but assembling the little figures for Blitz Bowl was a nightmare. They are pieces of figures that you punch out of a plastic grid thing and then assemble. It hurt my fingers so bad. So I said, literally painful. And he said, yes, they were like this. And he shows a picture of it, which I assume is a standard Warhammer thing. But it's basically like, when you used to get those old models that are like the plastic grid with pieces in them.
Oh, yeah.
Except these are pretty thick plastic spruces or sprues or whatever they're called. And what are those called? The things that hang off the edge of the minis? Anyway, so they're pretty thick, and he was punching with his hand. Apparently, you're supposed to use some kind of tool to like clip them out of there. But he's like, my hands were in so much pain by the end of the process.
I had a job working at a molding plant when I was like in high school or something. We had to like chip the little plastic edges off of these things with X-Acto knives. What a brutal, painful memory that was. So I feel sorry for anybody who has to deal with that kind of stuff.
Yeah, apparently this is a pretty common thing in like miniature gaming where you actually just get the models as, these little sheets of plastic. You got to take them apart, glue them together and all that stuff. No, thank you.
Ugh.
I guess Kingdom Death Monster, that's one of the reasons why I've never even wanted to try that game, because somebody commented that basically you could spend as much time assembling Kingdom Death Monster as you would ever get to play, get the play experience out of it. Yeah. So anyway, a few negative experiences there, but hey, if you're interested, there's a whole bunch more great stories over on our Blue Sky account and our Facebook group. That was a super fun thread to read. So check it out. All right. Well, let's jump into a description of Thunder Road Vendetta.
In Thunder Road Vendetta, 1 to 4 players take to the mean streets of a post-apocalyptic world for a one-of-a-kind race fueled by gasoline and bloodlust. No surprise if this game calls to mind Mad Max, the 1980s classic starring Mel Gibson, but Thunder Road is actually an homage to another 1980s classic, the original 1986 Thunder Road board game, which incidentally came out just a year after the Mad Max sequel Beyond Thunderdome, which also featured the incomparable Tina Turner both as the star of the film and singing its awesome theme song, We Don't Need Another Hero. Anyway, enough of that trip down memory lane, but I just wanted to point out that in the 1980s, killer cars and, I guess thunder were apparently everywhere. So back to the game. The action in Thunder Road Vendetta takes place on a central, linear racetrack made up of several interchangeable tiles with a variety of obstacles and hazards. Each player also gets 3 cars in small, medium, and large, a control panel for each, and a set of dice. Each round, players will roll their dice to determine what actions will be available to them, and then play will proceed with a series of turns where players use their dice to move their vehicles or take other special actions. Needless to say, this is no run-of-the-mill racing game. It's perfectly appropriate and even encouraged to slam your vehicle into your opponent's cars. And one of the special actions you can take is to call in an airstrike on your buddy's vehicles. Bottom line, this is not downforce or heat pedal to the metal. And other than the specifics of how a crash works, or how you shoot at your enemies, or any of that kind of thing, and that's basically the gist of the game. Play will proceed until a player gets one of their cars across the finish line, or if only one player actually has any cars left in the race. And then that player will be declared the winner. Thunder Road Vendetta was designed by Dave Chalker, Brett Myers, Noah Cohen, Justin Jacobson, Jim Kiefer, Brian Neff, and Rob Davio, and is published by Restoration Games.
Thanks for that rules description, Chris. And I'll just mention this was the first play for all of us tonight. And we played both with the base game, but we also played with a couple modular expansions, including the Chop Shop expansion and Carnage at Devil's Run. So we'll be talking probably some of the elements of those expansions may come into our conversation as well.
First thing I want to talk about, you can tell it's a throwback game because it's essentially roll and move. The first thing you're doing, one of the first things you're doing is rolling your dice, and you don't just move right away. When it's your turn, you assign a dice to whichever vehicle you're going to use, whether it be the small, the medium, or the large one. You put it on there, and then you move your guy. And that's such a basic, really, really fun mechanism. So simple to pluck your guy up and move him down towards the finish line. So that roll and move throwback to Monopoly days was something that just stood out and was a blast for me. So what do you guys think about that?
I thought it was awesome, but I also want to be clear. It's not quite as simple as Monopoly, where you roll the dice and then you move. You actually get to pick which car you assign your dice to, or to a special action, because there are different special actions like the airstrike that I mentioned that require a certain type of dice to do it. So there's a little bit of strategy there, and you get the chance to move in, slightly different directions and maneuver around the board. But still, throwing those dice I thought it was super fun. I had a great time with it.
This is not roll and move. This is a dice worker placement game. You got it all wrong, Adam. No, what I actually thought was fun. I mean, the reason why it works is that you do still have choices. You're not just like at the whim of the dice that you roll. You get to make some pretty fun and significant choices. And the fact that you're doing one card at a time means you get to see what your opponents did on their turn. So then you can decide who can I go run into right now, or who can I get behind so I can shoot at them at the end of the round. But I think what I had the most fun with here was whenever one of the variable elements came into the game, and that was if you would pass over these obstacles that were out on the boards you're driving across. And they're just these little tiles. They all look the same on the back, but you flip one over, and who knows what's going to be there. And sometimes they were just really fun. They were mostly negative to some extent, or at least risky, but some of them were just silly fun, like the oil slick, where you would just roll this dice and it would tell you which direction you moved. And sometimes you'd get an extra bonus movement.
What'd you say, Tim? Did you say you roll a dice and then you move? Is that what you just said?
Different dice. It's a different dice. By the way, there's a ton of different dice for different effects in this game. But one of them is this movement dice, not your typical D6s. Anyway, so you could potentially move forward, but also you could potentially move back to your left and end up under a chopper and get blown up. So it could, you never knew what was going to happen when you ran over one of these. And the other thing is, when you got shot or you got damage, you get this random damage token out of a bag, and they were all super hilarious or funny too. Like, just a variety of effects that could come up. So every time somebody drew a damage or hit one of those obstacles, it was just an exciting moment on the game. And I had a blast watching what happened.
So, right, other than the dice you're going to assign to your vehicles, there's 4 or 5, or I don't know how many other dice that come up during the course of play. It's whether it's the shoot dice or like the oil slick dice, the purple one that is essentially a roll it and it tells you where you're going to move. There's the green, the stunt dice that tells you how many, the stunt dice that tells you the quantity of whatever is going to happen. So the way they use all these different dice is really neat to see. So the oil slick, for instance, you just roll the purple dice, which tells you where you're going to go in one space in one direction. Or what was the one you kept getting, Chris? The dazed, I think it was. So you do roll the purple one or you roll a stunt dice that tells you you're going to roll the purple one 4 times, and then you're just kind of bebopping around in any old direction.
That was hilarious. There's one time when Chris just keeps moving around. He's doing like donuts out in the middle of the street and ends up exactly back where he was started.
So there's different dice that get used in different ways. A lot of fun, all the dice play here. I thought that was pretty great. What else did we have? We had the draft at the beginning of the game. I thought that was neat. So I think that's is that part of the expansion?
The Chop Shop expansion. Yeah. So there was 2 parts to that. One was everyone started with 2 asymmetric characters and you picked one. And, they were slightly asymmetric, had a couple different effects on them. And then we got to draft the car effects or the car upgrades. I think they're called upgrades, where basically we draft 3 and we're going to assign 1 to each of our cars, and it gives each of our cars a unique ability. Yeah, that was really cool.
Yeah, so that was a nice way to start the game, the draft, and then picking which guy you wanted to have. So my leader was something Esquire, the
Machine Gun Joe Esquire, the King of Bullets.
The King of Bullets. So he was great. So that let me re-roll the target dice. So I got to shoot twice every time. If I didn't hit on the first one, I got to try again. And then one of those other draft cards from that initial drafting phase, I got to assign a card that made it extra hard to hit my little tiny car, who's already extra hard to hit. So it made it less of a chance for that guy to get sniped as he was driving down the Thunder Road. And that's the guy who ended up, all you guys just ended up killing each other off, and I was the only one left with cars on the road. Yeah, I didn't have to go anywhere. You guys just took care of it for me.
I think I killed myself more than anybody killed me. I kept running into random walls and like falling into pits and stuff.
Well, in that chain reaction effect of things happening was part of the fun. But actually, before I get into that, I want to come back to that. But let me talk for a second about the collisions, because crashing was actually one of the core elements of the game. So the way this worked, this is really cool. If you crashed in your car into another car crashed into you, whatever, the car that does the crashing goes on top, and then the other one goes on the bottom. And then you roll a die to tell you which one of the 2 cars, the one on the top or the one on the bottom, is going to be affected. And then you roll that other die, the purple die, that shows you which space the moving car is going to move. And it could have a bunch of different effects from there. It could move it into a wall and kill the person, or it could actually do something good. But the larger car, because you have 3 sizes of cars, the larger car ends up having the option of re-rolling the die. So you get a little bit of a benefit there from having a larger car. So you end up having these crashes. And in our game, at the beginning, it was really crowded out there on the track. I mean, there was not a lot of space to maneuver. So you ended up with this chain reaction where one car hits another car. That car goes flying off into another car. I think at one point, Tim hit a wreck, and then a wreck flew off into another car. I mean, this stuff was just going crazy all over the board. And like Adam said, every single time one of those wacko dice got rolled, it was like this hilarious comical moment. I mean, I don't think I've laughed so much playing a board game in I don't even know how long, but just the stuff started happening, and then one thing happened after another, and it was just hilarious.
Yeah, one of the other cool elements of this, which we didn't really get to experience, but I love the concept of it, is that there's this road, and it's basically like 3 boards laid out, and they have a road down the middle of it, and there's different terrain and stuff. Each of the boards is unique. And once a card gets to the end of the 3rd board, then you basically take the first board off. Any cars that are on it just get removed from the game. And then you put a new random board in the front and push everything back. So you kind of get this rotating roadway that you just keep moving down until you finish the 5th road. That's kind of when the end of the race would happen. We didn't even really get to experience it because we all blew each other up before we got past that 3rd board. But I like the idea of it, and that it's a whole bunch of random boards. They're double-sided, so you just get random terrain that's going to show up. You don't know what's going to show up in the middle of the race, and it looked great. It felt like you're really looking at a roadway that's kind of progressing as you're moving down this thing. So I think that was a really clever. Well, we'll get into theme and production in a little bit, but I thought that was a really clever way to handle that theme.
Absolutely, Tim. More about the roadway. I really like the different terrain and how that affected the movement of your vehicles. So you had the main road, this kind of crusty, deteriorating asphalt concrete patch that had some connection basically throughout the entire map with these hazard tiles in the way. And patches of that were eroded away with sand, and then patches of that had mud on it too. And then you had this impassable terrain, these mountains or boulders. If you hit those, then boom, you're just crashing, you're dead, your guy's out. Also, if you got pushed off the map entirely, which happened to Chris one time, I think, then because Tim blew him away with his helicopter, then you're also out. So the way the different terrain types affected the movement of the vehicles, I thought that was pretty nifty too.
Yeah, and by the way, I didn't blow him away, just blow him away with my helicopter. I shot him, and he took a damage token, and the random damage token he drew was something like what was it called? Anyway,
blast off. It was called blast off.
Blast off.
Yeah, blast off. It represented he just got like blown off the road, and so he had to roll these 2 dice that told him how far he was going to go in one direction. He went flying off the edge of the board.
That was hilarious. Would have been more hilarious if it was Tim, but it was still hilarious.
That's still pretty good.
Well, let's jump into the theme and production of Thunder Road Vendetta, and I just want to start with the fact that there's not a lot of artwork in this game, but especially if you play with this Chop Shop expansion where you get these little upgrade cards for your cars, the artwork, okay, look at the box cover on this game, and it's awesome. Probably the best box cover that exists in the board game world right now, and that is completely brought through in the artwork on these cards that you see in the game on the road. Awesome production from an artwork perspective.
I feel like before I go, Chris had something urgent he had to say.
Yeah, we never talked about shooting, which is kind of important.
That is very important. Let's
drop it right here in the middle of
while the box cover is amazing, Tim, shooting was a very important part of the game. Go ahead, Chris.
One other thing I want to mention on mechanics that we hadn't touched on was shooting, which is a huge thing here. Every time you're in a spot where you can shoot at somebody, so usually that's going to be if you've got one of the 3 spots in front of you, or in Tim's case, he had this rail gun that let him shoot 3 spaces forward, so he had longer range. And I think there are other variations you can get cars that give you different abilities, but you can shoot at other cars, and if you hit them, then they take damage. And that's another one of those places where the type of car that you're getting shot with or shot at makes a difference. So the larger your car, the more likely you are to get hit, because again, there's a special die that you roll, and it tells you which kind of vehicle that particular shot is going to hit. And the most hits in there are for large vehicles, and then it gets, fewer and fewer down to the small vehicles. So there were a couple places where the size of your vehicle and how you used it was actually pretty strategic. But that was part of the biggest part. I think one of the biggest parts of the fun of the game was trying to position yourself so that you were in just the right spot to take a shot and not let people get behind you. So that was another key thing.
Yeah, shooting was awesome. Now let's get back to the production. Thunder Road Vendetta.
Right. So I haven't seen this one, but I have looked at pictures. The production looks fantastic. The toy factor here, this is one of the first things I noticed. The toy appeal is amazing here. You've got cars. If you splurge for the super deluxe mega Kickstarter version, you've got this washed cars. These things will look beat up, like they've been driving around in the dirt and the mud forever. So yeah, who doesn't like playing with cars? There's these little motorcycles. There's a big rig you get to play around with. Helicopters are cruising around. All these dice are just fantastic as well. So the toy appeal here is off the charts cool.
Yeah, I mean, I really don't have a whole lot to add. I mean, 5 stars. This is a pretty doggone close, in my opinion, to a flawless production. The art is delightful. The board is simple and effective. The cars and the choppers look great, especially with the Maximum Chrome edition. I can't think of a single thing that I would change on the production of this game.
Can't disagree on that. Yeah, and I guess we should mention, we played with the Maximum Chrome edition on Tabletop Simulator tonight. And what does that add? Here's what I think it adds. I'm not 100% sure on this, but as far as I can tell, it adds washes to the cars and the choppers, which are like the little, piece, the minis that you're playing with in the game. But it adds a whole bunch of mini expansions, some of which I think can be bought separately. So, that's something to think about. And by the way, I think after this episode releases in about a week, there's going to be a new Kickstarter from Restoration Games that includes, you can now get this Maximum Chrome edition again. And I would highly recommend that if you're going to pick this up on the Kickstarter, start with that, because I can tell you just from our experience, the little bit of stuff that these little modules that we added in, and we didn't play with all of them, I think it added a lot of fun to the game. I'm not sure it would have been quite as fun if it had been just the base game. So not really a production thing, but something to think about as you're considering, purchasing this on the Kickstarter.
Yeah, I'm going to second that. And I started the game saying, hey, let's not play with the expansions. Let's just play with the base game. And Tim insisted we do it. And I'm glad he did because, it was a great experience. And I thought that they really added something pretty unique.
What I've learned at this point in this hobby is that where we are from playing games, you should always play with the advanced modules in a game. Like if a game, not necessarily expansions, but if a game comes with like basic mode or like the first game you play and then advanced mode, always play with the advanced mode because you're kind of missing out on some stuff if you don't play with everything that you've got available to you in at least the starter box.
Other than the physical stuff they get with game, I think Chris was mentioning it too, the fonts that they used and everything together, the artwork, the typeface, everything ties together so well, and it's all impactful and pretty bold. I don't know. Some of the chits are a little boring. Some of those little damage that you flip over the hazard and it's like a mine or whatever, just the red and black ones. And that's not even that bad. That's just the dullest thing they have. And it's not even that bad. Those are still pretty cool.
I kind of like those. I thought it was it was kind of a cool style that worked well with it without being too
to me, that's kind of the one thing that stands out as not being not as impressive as the rest of the game. Still not bad. Still just doesn't have that punch and impact that the rest of the production has.
And by the way, on production too, we were talking about a lot of dice in this game. Everybody has like these D6 you're playing with, and those are just standard D6, so nothing special there. But there's some pretty cool custom dice for all of the special effect dice that you get played with. Those were pretty awesome.
Yeah, they all had different iconography on them, and they were all different colors, so it was easy to tell which die was which. So nicely done.
But we got to talk about what the highlight here is, and that's the theme. And the theme is telling a story of a bunch of racers running down the road, blowing each other up, shooting at each other. This is like Mad Max plus Spy Hunter all in one package. And it carries through probably better than any theme in any board game I've ever played. It is 100% thematic. You feel it. You feel the moments. It's cinematic. I love the theme here.
The theme's great, Tim. I like that you have a little bit of that Mario Kart feel too.
Yeah.
I like that you have 3 cars. Each one of us has 3 cars and you have to take them all out. How are you going to use those all together? Or are they going to make it to the board? Are you just going to abandon 2 and try to run away with 1? Or, so I think there's a lot to play around with there, maybe, unless it's just shoot them up as best as you can and hope you're the last one alive. So yeah, theme here was pretty fun.
Yeah, that couldn't have been better. Super fun, enjoyable, very nostalgic for those of us who grew up with Mad Max in the 80s. And I actually am glad you called out Spy Hunter, Tim, because this felt so much like Spy Hunter as you're playing it. But, you also mentioned the cinematic nature of the feel of this game. And that is absolutely right. I was talking before about the cascade effects of things that started happening. Every time that chain reaction started, I could picture this like I was watching a movie. And that was half of the fun. Yeah. And I could see myself, like cheering and shouting, and I can like picture myself as one of those people like watching this race or being in this race on the sideline, wearing my like studded leather belt and, and like the mohawk spiky haircut and just like, the people in Radlands and of course Mad Max. Oh man, it makes me long for the good old days.
Yeah, there was just so many moments that you couldn't even have expected. Like you see this board and you're like, there's no way that this is going to create that much fun. But it was like almost every time someone took an action, something would happen that created a fun moment. You could be flying over a ramp and rolling to see whether you hit a wall or made it over or just landed in a mud pile, or bounce into a car that bounces into another car that hits an oil slick that ends up under a chopper that gets blown up. Tons of those moments throughout this game. It was shocking to experience that kind of actual like emotional feel in a board game for me anyway. Like that's how I don't think I've ever played a board game where I actually was seeing the activity in my mind, in my imagination, and it was almost represented on the board perfectly.
Sorry, Tim, I was almost going to launch off a giant sneeze there. I think I threw you off a little bit, but yeah, you had these.
He was stunned.
He was dazed. You had these moments in these games. You're talking like a chain reaction, like a 15 car pileup, and in this game it was like a 7 car pileup. You could see that happening in the chaos and cars doing cartwheels off the side of the board when Chris's car got just blowed up by Tim's helicopter. Yeah, you can really imagine the Mad Max theatrics or any desert car chase scene that you can think of. You mentioned 80s angry car shoot 'em up movies, Maximum Overdrive. I don't know why I thought of that one, but that's another
Nice.
angry big rig one.
Stephen
Emilio
King.
Estevez.
Holy cow, that was a deep cut, Adam. That was a very deep cut.
Well, let's get to our final question, and that is, would you request to play this game again? And as I mentioned, it's going to be up on Kickstarter in about a week. So after playing this, would you consider backing this game at this point?
I would absolutely request to play this one again. I don't know. I don't think I'm going to back it. I'm going to take a look at it and see what my options are for backing. I saw this one, that Kickstarter edition for sale for like $350. I'm sure you could find it for less than that, but just a quick look at the price tag on this one, the aftermarket, was pretty expensive. So people will love this game, and the production speaks for itself. Like, you get all these toys, you get all this stuff. It's absolutely going to be a pleasure to play with in real life, and I can't wait to see this one at the table and sit down and play it.
Hands down, yes, I am going to be asking to play this game again. In fact, I'm pretty confident that I'm going to back this one when they do the reprint with Maximum Chrome, because I cannot imagine playing this and not having a good time. Now, I'm going to say that with the caveat that, this is not a deep thinky game. This is something you spend a lot of time chucking dice. Really, there's so little strategy. There's some, but there's so many things can happen that it's not going to be a centerpiece of a big game night for the most part. It's going to be a side game, but any game group that I play with, I think if you put this on the table and get a game going, it'll maybe take an hour, probably less than an hour, and everybody is going to have such a great time. I do want to look at the price, what they end up selling it for, because I don't want to pay the aftermarket price, but if they do the reprint and it's a reasonable price, I think I am going to be backing this one. So much fun.
I had a surprising amount of fun playing. I expected to like this. I expected to like Thunder Road Vendetta, but I didn't expect to like it as much as I did, and I can't not buy it now. I want to have this game. I want to get playing. This is like another Clank for me. It's a game that's got a little bit of fun choices to make, but mostly it's just kind of silly, tells a story. You're going around doing the best you can and having fun with it. I love Clank. I love playing Downforce, and Thunder Road Vendetta is going to be another game in that kind of series where it's just a fun game night with friends. Yeah, I'm actually kind of surprised. I haven't backed a Kickstarter or any kind of crowdfunding game for probably 6 months at this point, but this is the one that's going to break my streak because I want to get this thing with everything. There's a couple new expansions I think coming out, and this game is so easy to add expansions. Just you throw extra modules in there, throw extra cards, throw some new characters you can play with. I'm all in on this game. I'm really excited about it.
Yeah, and one other thing I wanted to add is that the rules overhead in this game is light enough that it's going to be fun, I think, for people that are not hardcore gamers. So if you have one gamer at the table, like if you're listening to this podcast, you're probably a gamer, and it probably means you play some pretty heavy stuff. And if you have this one, you'll be able to bust this out as long as you've got people who are a little bit tolerant of rules and they have you there to help explain things as you go along. I can picture having a great time with my family with this one. Super fun.
All right, cool. Well, that wraps up Thunder Road Vendetta. Let's jump into some games that have been on our table right after this. Welcome back. What do you guys had on your table this week?
Well, about, I think it was a week ago, the incredibly handsome designer of envelopes of cash. I know he listens to our show. He's an internet buddy of mine and now a Hollywood movie star. Andy Schwartz was in town filming for a movie or a documentary, something that's going to release on, I think he said Amazon Prime within the next 6 months or so. Actually about the downfall of the Pac-12 college athletic conference. So he was doing that. He was filming that up somewhere in LA, and we met up. He came down to my house. So now he's not even internet, but he's a real life buddy. He brought some games with him. He brought NAR. I showed him Innis. He was interested in that. And he also brought Glory to Rome. So I'm going to talk about Glory to Rome, which is notoriously out of print. And from what I understand, will never be reprinted again due to a few issues, including the feuding developers, Ed Carter III and Carl Chuddick. So I've heard a ton about the game. I figured most of it was due to the lore and myth surrounding the Grail status of this one. I saw the black box version going for about $350, about the same as Thunder Road Vendetta. And this game is tiny. It's just a few cards and a few player boards. So if you can find this one at your thrift store, pick it up because it's worth a lot of money. Anyway, I didn't know what to expect. And Andy had an Italian version of it, which he painstakingly translated and stickered every card, all the player boards. He had one that he just left in the Italian and he showed us what that looked like. So that was neat to see everything in Italian. And he taught us the game. He taught it to both Sarah and I. So we had a 3-player game going of Glory to Rome. And guys, this game was fantastic.
Glory to Rome.
So a brief overview of how to play Glory to Rome. This game is all about multi-use card play. So on your turn, you pick a card, which is a suit. It could be a red or purple or green, or I forget all the colors. But you put that card down, and that represents the action that you're going to do. It could be start building a building, or it could be go to the junk pile and grab a resource, or it could be start using your resources to make another building, or it could be play a character that's going to help your engine improve. In other words, make your actions stronger in the future. So that's what you do. The first thing you do, you put this card down with a certain color. The next person can decide to follow. If they have that same suit, that same color card, they'll put a card down also. Or if they don't have that same suit, or they don't want to put that same suit down, they can decide to draw some other cards from the deck. And that goes around like that. Everyone decides to follow or draw some cards. Then you get to do the action. So if it's go to the scrap pile, the junk pile, you can grab some resources and you stash them in your personal resource area. And then the next person goes, and then the next person. And that's basically the game. So these actions are start building a building, add a character that'll help you. That's that engine building piece that'll help your actions get stronger in the future. And the most interesting one is when you start building a building. So these buildings are crazy. They have these super crazy powers that let you say, build a building for one resource instead of the full 3 resources. Or I had a building that as soon as I built it, ended the game. Crazy buildings, crazy player powers, a lot of interaction. There's one of the other cards that you can do, one of the other actions is this go fish mechanic. So you put it down, again, you have to wait for people to lead or follow. And then when it gets back to you, say, okay, give me a card that is the brick resource, the red card. And then if anybody has that card, they have to give it to you. And then say you had one of the engine builder modifiers, 2 other of that card that you'd previously played. It's where you tuck it on the left side of your board that augment that action. Then all these players would have to give you 2 additional of that resource. So the engine building is crazy. The buildings that you're going to build are crazy. That common pool I've been talking about, once you put this card down in front of you, at the end of the day, you're done doing your actions. At the end of the round, the card that you put in front of you and anybody else put in front of them, if they followed your action, those go in the middle to this common pool. So that's how that develops, which I thought that was a pretty neat mechanism as well. Anyway, it just goes around like this, round, round, and round. You get points for building buildings. And I think there's a point threshold that you ended, or if you had that crazy building that I built, that ends the game. That's basically it. Glory to Rome.
Well, so here's the question, Adam. I mean, you have a game like this that becomes a cult classic because it's out of print. If it was, still in print, then it wouldn't have quite the same cachet about it. But if it's that great a game, you'd think they'd do a reprint on it. So what's the deal here? Reconcile those for me?
So the story that Andy tells me, and he knows way more about board games than I do, is that the 2 publishers, Ed Carter III and Carl Chuddick, I think they had some sort of feud. One of them went nearly bankrupt because of the Kickstarter, having to put in their own money, or there was a lot of issues with the Kickstarter. I'm not quite sure. I'd have to go read some internet rumors about what actually went down. But I think it's the feud between those 2 that's going to prevent it from ever getting reprinted in whichever region of the world or licensed. I don't know how it all works. I'm just going to make up more stuff until the listeners believe me.
Here's the story that I heard. So when they did the the black box version of this. They put it because it was a reasonably popular game, and so they decided to go on Kickstarter. Kickstarter was kind of new at the time. They're like, let's put this up on Kickstarter, but they hadn't learned the lessons that Kickstarter was taught by that point. And that is that they put it up and they said, we'll ship it anywhere in the world for free. So you pay $20 for our game and we'll cover the shipping. And they got a ton of international orders, and the shipping costs more than they made on a lot of these games. So they literally did end up fulfilling it. But one of the two, I assume it's not Carl Chudik because he's still making games, but the other guy basically sold his house, like went completely bankrupt to cover the cost to get all this stuff taken care of. And he said, I'm washing my hands of this. I want to have nothing to do with it. And from what I've read, nobody can reach him. Nobody can get in touch with him to like he could probably make a ton of money back just by selling somebody the rights to this game because it's so beloved. But in any case, that's, I think, what happened with it. Adam, I was looking at the artwork of the Italian version that I think you were playing. So is that is that the original like pre-black box artwork? Or is that something that was separate just for Italian?
Again, I don't know either. I've heard a lot of people like that black box, that clean artwork of the black box edition. And this one, I think it is that Clemens Franz. I think he was one of the artists on that Italian version. So it has that kind of cheesy. Was it? Because
it looked kind of comical to me, like a little bit cartoonish, but I didn't mind what I was seeing. At least the pictures I was seeing online, I thought they were kind of cute, and not as like I'd heard that it was not great artwork, but I thought it was kind of like almost Imperial Settlers style art style to me.
Yeah, it's not horrible at all. It's very throwbacky. It reminds me of like an old school game from that era. What I don't know when it was 2009 or something like that for the Italian version, somewhere in those 2000 something.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, I'd heard there was that re-implementation, so I should try it. I know that Carl Chudik also made Innovation, which is out on Board Game Arena, and I tried a game or two of that. It felt too abstract, and I just didn't really know what was going on with that. Maybe it's a great game, but I would like to try Glory to Rome. It seems more fun to me, and just looking at the artwork and hearing your description of it.
There's a lot going on, a lot of moving parts, but it all makes sense with these multi-use cards, and the way it comes together was cool.
I was actually at a game night a few months back, and one of my friends had an original copy of Glory to Rome, and it was in this slightly scuffed box. And it was just like, it was like seeing that, golden idol at the beginning of
Indiana
Jones. Yeah. And Indiana you feel Jones. Like,
yeah.
I'm seeing history here. I don't know.
All right. Well, I got a couple of games that were on my table this week, but one is actually kind of there's a good throwback reference to Adam's description of Glory to Rome here. So back in episode 35, me, Adam, and Steve played and reviewed Concordia. And Concordia is a classic game by Matt Gertz about trading in the Mediterranean. And what I remember about that gameplay, because it was the first and only time I played it up until this week, was that I had a blast. I thought it was a fantastic game. And then we got done and I said, no, I don't care if I ever play that game again. And the only thing I could prescribe it to was just the very boring theme and just kind of bland. Like there's just nothing that just draws me into it. So some friends wanted to play it this week and I was like, yeah, I remember having a good time with that. Let's give it a shot. And guys, every single turn of the game, I was like, this is an amazing game. I love this game. This game's fantastic. I should go buy this. I need this game. It was amazing. And then we got done. And the next day that we're on our text thread and one of them goes, hey, we should play Concordia again next week. And I was immediately disinterested. So there's something about Concordia, like the idea of Concordia that pushes me away. But I just wanted to say that you should probably check this game out. If theme and again, production isn't bad, I'll talk about that a little bit, but if that's not important to you, this is a really, really fantastic game. Such a fun, interactive game, great moments, great choices in it. It's a little game where you've got a hand of cards. Everyone's got the same starting hand, but you can add new abilities to your hand. And as you play a card, you take the action that it says on it. You're basically moving your little characters around this map of somewhere around the Mediterranean and settling places and trading goods. And it's a blast. This is a fantastic game. Somehow the theme still doesn't work for me, but I had a really fun play with it. So I was glad I revisited it because I would be happy to play this again anytime again. I might even search it out and just kind of force it into my mind. I mean, Castles of Burgundy stuck with me at some point, so I don't know why Concordia wouldn't, but good play of that. But I thought it was funny too. If you go back and listen to our review of that was the episode where I completely botched the Fox in the Forest. description so much that Adam had to put a little disclaimer in at the beginning of it saying, Tim's going to ramble here for like 5 minutes. So just ignoring none of it makes any sense. So that's funny. Well, speaking of bland board games, I also got a chance to play Newton this week. This is designed by Simone Luciani and Nestor Mangone. And this was, of course, the art was by Clemens Franz, because when we're talking about bland board games, what else would we be talking about? This is published by Cranio Creations. Guys, this is a fantastic Simone Luciani, Nestor Mangone game. All these Italian designer games, they're so great. This is a really solid Euro. Takes some mechanisms of some things you guys have seen in other games. The thing I think it reminded me the most of was Darwin's Journey without the worker placement. Instead, it's got that Concordia kind of hand management style thing where you've got a handful of cards. You can add new cards to your thing. But there's kind of like a few different little puzzles. There's a map on one board, and then there's like a technology tree on another board. And basically the actions you take are going to move you up these things. And what the most fun part of it is that you've got this, like, on your own player board, you've got this like bookshelf of books, of symbols that you want to cover with books. And so the way you're going to do that is by moving around these maps or unlocking technologies that give you access to these books. You're Newton, you're out there like trying to discover things, discover the knowledge around the world and collect it. And so it's a fun little puzzle that comes together really well. The hand management is kind of cool in that each of your starting player boards has one of these action symbols printed on it. And your actions are better based on the number of them that you've played in that round. So you'll play an action card, and if it matches the action symbol that's pre-printed on your board, it's like you get double the power of that action. And if you play a second card in that round with the same symbol on it, you get triple the action on it. And you can pay coins to kind of like increase that. At the end of the round, you have to take one of your cards that you played, and you basically get slotted under your player board. And now that is just a permanent symbol on your player board, but you've lost that card. And each of the cards have, or many of the cards have some like little bonuses that you get when you play them. It's a really fun puzzle. I played this once in person, a 3-player game last week. And then a listener, after I posted a picture of it, one of our listeners invited me to a game on Yukata, which it is out on there. And so I've been playing a game of that this week, async. It's a great game. It is, the whole time I was like, freaking Clemens Franz. Like, this guy just ruined this gameplay for me. Like, it's so dull and ugly to look at, but the game is actually really fun. So again, if you, just like Concordia, if you know, theme, if production isn't important to you, this is a fantastic Euro. Maybe not the best of the Italian designers, but I think a solid game worth checking out. And I'm happy to revisit it.
Man, I don't know anything about the gameplay in this other than what you just said, but looking at these pictures make me want to, like, I don't know, go watch TV or something.
Right.
Like, why all yellows and browns? I don't understand. Like, beige, brown, and yellow. There is no color in these boards at all. And Clemens Franz, like, his art style is so outdated. Listen, publishers, if you want to push me away from playing a game, even if it's the best game, hire Clemens Franz to do the artwork. I don't understand why he's doing so many board games. I'm sorry, Clemens Franz. If you're a listener to the show, I apologize. I know that this is your style, but it doesn't work for me.
And apparently many people love it. So we're the outliers, I guess. I don't know.
Or maybe just inexpensive to hire? Maybe it works fast. Maybe publishers like, this guy's trustworthy and get him at a good rate. I know he's going to get the work done.
Tim just slammed something out. He was upset. I don't know what that was all about.
Tim's breaking stuff over there.
All right. Well, that's all the games that we've had on our table this week. Before we wrap up today, I do have a review I want to read really quickly. We, as always, appreciate any reviews left for us on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to the show. These do really help other people find the show. They help people listen in. And I'm so proud of all the reviews, the great reviews we've gotten. This was another 5-star review. And this was by Sugar on Apple Podcasts in North America. The title was So Good, and the text was, such a good podcast for board game enthusiasts. Really like the format of the show and how much they pack into each episode. Each of the hosts are very well spoken, very informative, and have a lot of respect for each other, even when they differ on opinions. They do a really good job introducing and summarizing the featured game each week. In fact, I played their overview of Revive recently for my gaming group when I was teaching them that game. Really appreciate the work you do, guys. Thanks. I would never have expected someone to use our audio overviews of a game to kind of help teach the game. I think that's amazing. And I think that was one of Chris's descriptions. So great job, Chris.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I never saw that coming. But thanks for the compliment. Really appreciate that.
Wait, so okay, you sent us the text, right, Tim? You didn't already say that in one of the last episodes. Okay, you sent the text. I was like, I feel like I've heard all this before. Okay, I was like, why are you saying that again? Okay.
All right. Well, if you enjoy the show, please rate and review us, and come check us out on our Facebook group and on Blue Sky. We'd love to interact with you out in those places. Also, next couple months, BGG Golden Geek Awards are coming out. Last year, we got a nomination for Best Podcast. This year, I'm really rooting for a runner-up spot. So keep an eye on that when it comes out. Nominate us, vote for us. We'll keep talking about that over the next couple months because we're really, really excited this year. Until next week, take care, everybody.
Good night, all.
Bye-bye. Which might include, what's the cool part about this? So, I'm getting a little lost here.